here we are. Welcome to Just a Thought, Sunshine Cathedral's weekend discussion program with me, Darrell Watkins, the senior minister of the Sunshine Cathedral, and my co-host, the Reverend Cindy Lippert, where we discuss just a thought. Every week we have a quote from some spiritual luminary, and that gets us going. This is live and unscripted. So we try to stay on topic. We we try to keep it a reasonable amount of time. There are these imaginary rules that we try to follow, but it's all in the moment. It is live and unscripted, and anything can happen, and sometimes does. So, but here we are. We always have a good time, and usually wind up stumbling over something pretty profound. So, do you have anything to add to that? to that warning? To that preamble to the show?
I think that's a pretty good warning. You know, what hatched this was the conversations you and I have casually, that one thing leads to another. And I think that's the way most friends talk.
Yes.
It starts on one topic and it goes out in the weeds somewhere.
Right. And sometimes we talk over each other, and sometimes there'll be an awkward silence, and just like you do. And we have for years though, we will just be talking about something, and we'll have some profound discovery, or we'll just laugh like ridiculous school kids or whatever. And someone will say, you know what, other people should be in on this. We should be sharing this. People should be part of this. And now they are. Now, whatever great thought we're thinking about, we are sharing with the interweb. Well, today's thought comes from Helen Wilmans. And I love that. And maybe people have noticed by now, we've covered Taniguchi and Yogananda and Morris Lichtenstein.
Jewish rabbi.
Yeah, Morris Lichtenstein. And so Lichtenstein. And now Helen Wilmans. I like bringing up people that were super significant to the New Thought movement who may have been forgotten. There's always the superstars of the moment, and you forget that there were a lot of other pioneers, and some of them were superstars in the day. They just didn't, we don't know maybe about them so much now. And Helen Wilmans was one of those people. She was a pioneer. I mean, really one of the key leaders of the mental science movement. Now, as far as I can tell, mental science was never as structured as unity, religious science, divine science, home of truth, church of truth. That it wasn't as structured as that. They had books, they had courses, they had conferences. I don't know that they had churches. And they were less theological than like unity. Charles Fillmore, very, very God, very Jesus. Kramer, Melinda Kramer, very, very God. Nona Brooks, very, very God. In fact, her big epiphany came while still being very involved in her Presbyterian church.
Quaker. She was Quaker.
Melinda was Quaker. Nona was Presbyterian.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. And Emmett Fox was Catholic. And so they were, but the mental scientists, they seemed to, Ernest Holmes was Congregationalist. As was Mary Baker Eddy originally. But the mental scientists, they were just sort of about applying this philosophy, it seems. That they were, some talked about God, but they were more interested in the principles and making them work.
Well, like Quimby. Quimby was mental, but he informed the New Thought movement by way of Emma Curtis Hopkins and Mary Baker Eddy. So. And
Helen Wilmans was a student of Emma Curtis. Everyone was, but she was a student of Emma Curtis Hopkins. Yeah. And I actually don't know what her religious background was, but she actually used her voice which is today's quote, to sort of critique the unhelpful doctrines of traditional religion, especially those that got in the way of free thinking and empowered thinking. And so she was very successful. She was a poor farm girl. She actually left her marriage because she sort of felt stuck. And so to become a journalist, a writer, an editor. And then she became wealthy. She became a wealthy person. I think she remarried. And then she became a leader in the mental science movement. She organized a couple of the conferences. She had students. She started a colony, like a commune, a community. I mean, she was, and then at the end, she actually had, after all of that, she had some misfortune because she would do healing, distance healing. And what that basically just means is people would write her. This was before the internet. And if you couldn't get to her and she couldn't get to you, you could write her and she would do a treatment by distance. But she still charged whatever her fee was. And so people, I think it was John Murray, a divine science minister, that he was once, he got in trouble for so-called practicing medicine without a license. His healing, his spiritual healing practice, he was actually sued for practicing without medicine without a license. Well, Helen Wilmans got in a similar predicament, and so, but her charge was fraud. That because she was offering a service she couldn't prove she was providing. Like, was she giving individual treatment each one? Was she doing a group for everyone who sent her a letter? Was she doing it at all? And of course she was. I mean, she was, but people out, people just not, jealous or whatever. And so her reputation was ended, was damaged. And that was at the end of her life. And so she sort of gave up on her spiritual teaching. She was sort of depressed and defeated. And then of course she died, which is a very sad ending to what was a really amazing life of someone who climbed out of poverty on her own, became rich, famous, literally taught thousands of people, students, was a leader in a movement that people don't know much about today, and yet it informed all the movements they do know about. So
and look at how many women started were at the beginning of New Thought. Yeah.
And she herself wrote about feminism. She was a feminist, which, in her day. And so, I'm so happy to bring up Helen Wilmans. So if you're a New Thought student or a New Thought historian, look into Helen Wilmans, who is the teacher who's giving us today's thought, just the thought for today. And what she says is the quintessence, the perfect example, the quintessence of insanity is in a religion that embraces the idea of a vengeful God and a condition of endless punishment. A little bit long, so I'm going to read it again. But she's fiery about it, right? She's not holding back. The quintessence of insanity is in a religion that embraces the idea of a vengeful God and a condition of endless punishment. She's really saying that if your God is mean, if your God will punish or abandon you forever, if your God's keeping score, that's crazy.
Yep, it is.
These are not yes or no questions. You actually have to engage.
I just wanted to make you laugh. Several things come to mind. First of all, my dear friend Carol Biggs,
yes.
Reverend Carol Biggs, just lost her husband, and what a wonderful gift that he had the last 26 hours of his life in his home and was able to be surrounded by family. But Carol, a retired Unity minister, was so gratified because before he left the hospital, in front of the doctor, he said, I'm ready to go and I'm at peace about it and actually kind of excited to see what's next. He said, because I know, because of my wife's ministry, that I will not be met by an angry man who will judge me. And so he was able to have a peaceful transition. That's a huge gift, especially for any minister, to have a family member that has been able to be helped by this wonderful religious philosophy that we love so much. The other thing that comes to mind, as you know, Richard and I founded Sage Coaching and Counseling.com at the beginning of the pandemic and the quarantine and all of that, because we realized in isolation there were going to be a great hardship emotionally for people, especially those living alone. We're finding that the people that are living by themselves are especially having a difficult time being so isolated. And also, it's brought up even more fear about the virus. The thing that I've noticed about this idea about a vengeful God is it seems to me, and this is from years of being raised as a fundamentalist Baptist child and then in through adulthood and getting into esoteric ideas and philosophies and then ultimately found my way to New Thought. It seems to me that the way we see God is the way we tend to see our most, how can I put it, the most powerful authority figure in our lives. In other words, if it was daddy and daddy was abusive, we see God as abusive. If it was mother in a matriarchal family, then we want to make sure we don't upset mama. So we see God as the feminine, and not always a good example. For those that seem to have peace about it, perhaps have good relationships with authority figures. But oftentimes, this vengeful God that is not helpful to life supportive ideas, to me, is kind of what ends up being out there. And we're hearing a lot of that now. And by the way, just as a reminder, Richard and I will help coach or counsel anybody, regardless of ability to pay.
That's sagecoachingandcounseling.com. I just this morning, really just this morning, people find us, and one of our broadcasts, it was a last Sunday's worship service, in fact, which was just, it was affirming, you know, that great poem that Jesse Jackson recited in 1971 on Sesame Street, you know, I am somebody.
Yeah.
And that was, you know, and it was just, people liked it. It was a good reminder, and it was a way to talk about affirmations and how to use them effectively. And we were pleased with that, of course. And but just today, well, actually last night one, and then another one today, people responding to that, obviously not fans of our ministry, and it was just very sort of threatening, you know, saying that was not of God, and God was going to get us, that there was a, you know, Jesus was coming back, and, you know, was basically taking names and kicking ass, and, you know, we were in trouble for what? For saying that people, even these people, they're not showing it, but that people basically are good, that people have love to give and deserve to be loved. I suspect these people have not been properly loved in their lives. You don't get that angry by being treated well. So, I mean, so what? God would be mad at us for what? For saying that everyone has sacred value, that love is love, that all gender identities and all mutual sharing of love is good. If your God really is not only annoyed by that, but to the point of wanting to make people suffer for it, you really have a psycho God. I mean, I think Helen Wilmans is saying that. Like, if your God can't handle people loving themselves or each other, then what kind of POS God have you got, right? And so I didn't respond to these. I mean, why bother? But I'm just amazed at how angry and vile. And here's what disturbs me about that, is that you'll never be better than your God. So we are always aspiring to be what we consider to be ultimately good and sacred and life-giving. So if that's your God, you'll never be better than that. In fact, your goal is to be like that. Emerson said, be careful what you are worshiping, because what you are worshiping, you are becoming. And so when people have these images of God that are just abusive and hateful and sociopathic and criminal, um, that what worries me is that you'll never be better than your God. And so if what you are holding up as the best is just absolutely vile, then that puts up so many obstacles for peace, for harmony, for joy, for healing in the world.
I agree. Oh, hold on a second. Richard? Sorry. The air conditioner just,
Oh, right.
um,
Remember world when
well,
I mentioned this is live and unscripted and anything can happen? Anyway, go on with your story,
and
Cindy.
anything just did. Yeah, sorry. Oh, well, that's what makes it exciting, right? No net. The reason the LGBTQ plus community is so important to me as a cisgender straight married woman is that the community focuses on love is love, and especially exalting how we need to love ourselves. This is why I keep saying it's a universal message, but you all do it better than anybody else. You go into the average congregation and you're going to hear God loves you, but it's like, here comes the giant but. And there is no exception.
Here's a mistake, an unloving mistake, an honest mistake, but that parents often make when they're trying to be allies to their queer kids, when they're trying to be supportive, and they will say, "I would love you even if you were," and then they will list something terrible. You know?
Right.
Like that is not the response to. My gender was misassigned at birth. That really, I look like this. They said I was this, but really I'm this. Or yes, 90+% of the world, they're going to wind up falling in love with someone of the opposite gender. I am in that minority of people who will probably fall in love with someone of the same gender. Like when we come out with telling who we are, this is who I've been. This is who I've wrestled to accept it myself. I've wrestled with the courage to tell you. Now I'm telling you, please don't compare me to an arsonist now, saying that you would love me even if I was a menace to society. Thank you for loving me no matter what, but this isn't a bad thing. This is a good thing. Not only is what I am a good thing, it is especially a good thing that I can embrace it, affirm it, celebrate it, and share it with you. And so all I need you to do is say, good for you for realizing who you are. Good for you for having the courage to tell me. Good for you for trusting me with this really wonderful information. Don't tell me that this won't hurt our relationship any more than it would if I were decapitating puppies. Well, of course that, thank you for loving me even though I do terrible things, but this is not a terrible thing.
Well, the thing, Darrell, is, straight people are always trying to find themselves too. It's like, oh, I once was a pharmacist and now I've decided to go into real estate. What courage, give me somebody who's been in the closet for same gender loving, that is what courage takes in this society at this time. Maybe in 100 years, it won't even be a footnote. Thank you, God, I've got grandkids that support their gay friends with their support groups and all that. And, we're so grateful that we're being the change the best that we can. But to be a straight ally, you've given us the gift, us meaning straight people, of saying, allow the straight people to make their mistakes as long as they're trying to learn. Mm-hmm. And, it's like I've told you before, help me learn to love you better. Help me understand what I don't know. This idea of, I like you if you're, straight, gay, happy, that's so insulting. Because it diminishes and it tries to make a joke. There are ministers, well-meaning ministers, that will still say the words sexual preference. It isn't about preference.
Yeah.
It's about orientation. You were born this way.
Yeah.
Just like
1975 just called. They want their ignorance back.
That's right. That's right. Well, how often have I told you I hate stupid? It's the one thing I hate. It's the one thing. I'm allowed one thing in my life. And it is the one thing I hate, because stupid is just chosen ignorance. You've already been exposed to the truth and you still decide to hang on, to your ignorance. But the thing is, people will say, I'm an ally. How do you demonstrate that in your life? And yes, we will accept what you're willing to do and can do, but it starts in the simplest way. When your Uncle Fred is trying to make a gay joke, stop him immediately and say, you can't do that in front of me. I don't control what you do.
Mostly because they're bad. If you want a good gay joke, ask a gay person.
Well, see, there you have it. There you have it.
And but all this prejudice and all this hate, fear of the other, it is religiously motivated, even by people who aren't religious. People who couldn't recite the Lord's Prayer. People that couldn't tell you 3 things that are in the Sermon on the Mount. People that couldn't name 12 characters from the Bible are sure that God doesn't like gay folks.
Right. One woman said to me one day, well, I don't believe in bisexual. I said, why? She said, I just don't. And I said, but you do know that it's a fact. She said, I don't believe in it. And I said, okay, then. Okay, just fine.
So for all the bisexuals in the world, they
don't count.
They don't exist anymore because she doesn't get it.
Right.
But they, I used to say, see, this is a version. See, ask a gay person. I used to say, being willing to bisex doesn't make you bisexual. That's a good queer joke. But you got to be a queer person to tell it. You got to be a queer person to tell it.
You got to be a pro, Darrell.
Yeah. Or I love being celibate. I celibate and give the rest away. But I'm bummed. I mean, you gotta, if you want,
you gotta keep it going.
That's the gay folks.
keep it entertaining. I still think we could do a lot with queer talk for straight people. I still do.
We wandered into those weeds today. We've only got about 4 or 5 more minutes here. I want to share a sad story. Now that we've been laughing and cutting up a little bit, let's end on a downer.
Okay. That'll cheer everybody up.
In the 90s, I got a phone call to visit a kid. Oh, he was maybe 30, but that still seems almost like a baby to me these days. He was a young man. He was a young man in any case, and very sick. He was in a nursing home. In those days, if you were chronically ill, HIV, you couldn't be on your own, but you couldn't just take up a hospital bed forever. They would put you in a nursing home. Now nursing homes are equipped as rehab facilities, and people do stay there for interim periods. But in those days, it was still not common to me anyway. Well, he was in a nursing home, this young man, just so that he would have a bed to sleep in and people would feed him food and people come visit him. He just couldn't be on his own. He was very ill. And he was from a fundamentalist Church of Christ, was what it was called, fundamentalist Midwestern church. And he quit going because when he came out, he knew, like, they were so homophobic. He knew that when he came out, he was basically telling them goodbye. And so that's what happened. He moved to the big city and did what you do when you feel repressed. Once you are free, he went just wild. Sadly, and you should be able to do that. You should be able to sow your oats and work it out and figure out who you are. But if you did that in the early mid 80s, a lot of times by the early 90s, you found yourself very sick, which was just unfair, but also the way it was. And so he was, and this was, the combination therapies came out in 1996, I think. This was well before then. So he was dying, and there was almost no hope that trajectory was going to change. And even though he had left the church, he was, the idea of the scary, punishing God was still with him. And so this poor soul was too sick to live and too scared to die. So he was just hanging on, though his life was miserable. was hanging on because he thought that not only was he sick as punishment from God, but that there was even worse to come. For what? For him telling the truth about who he is? For him looking for love and happiness, perhaps in some misguided ways, but you get that. That's part of growing up. And so, yeah, that he admitted who he was. He looked for love. He looked for happiness. He kicked up his heels, and for that, a deity. I can't imagine a friend, a good cousin, anyone who would like hold any of that against you, but God. So I got to spend some time with him, an hour with him, which is unusually long for a hospital visit. I used to try to, just say, we're thinking about you, love you, and get out of their way, because it's hard enough to rest in a hospital anyway. But with him, we spent about an hour because he just was so scared. And he didn't call. His mother called me. It's how I even got the call. She says he's just so scared of what's next. And then she felt guilty about it. She said, I raised him in the church that put that in his head. And so I was able to say, your mother loves you so much. She found me. She didn't know me. She didn't know anybody. She just knew that my church would not ever condemn you or be mean to you. And she called me, and here I am, because she wanted you to have comfort. She wanted you to feel good. She wanted you to trust that you're not in trouble for being who you are. And I said, I just think your mother must be so loving. Your mother must love you so much. Do you trust that? And he said, yeah, of course I trust that. Mom loves me. And I said, I promise you, God has to be as good as your mom. I just won't have a God that's not as good as your mom. And then I quoted from the prophet Isaiah, who speaking for God, says, like a mother comforts her children, so will I comfort you. And so I said, I really, I just won't have a God that's not as good as your mother, who loves you, who frantically was making sure that your last moments would have some comfort, that you would hear something good, that you would be affirmed, that she reached out to strangers to make sure that could happen. I said, that's what love looks like. And God is love. And that night, he let go. That night, he made his transition. And I just know that a love that is all embracing and unimaginably beautiful enfolded him. And he's in that love even still. He was in that love to begin with, but he didn't know because he was distracted by all the bullshit, by all the lies he had been told. But I just know that when he walked through that cosmic door, there was nothing but light and love and joy waiting for him, and perfect healing. So I'm sorry for all the angry, vengeful God talk that has tormented so many people. But I promise, even if you didn't have a good mom, if you've met a good mom, if you saw a good mom on television, if you had a good great aunt who was, you wished you was your mom because she was so amazing, that is just a little tiny sampling of what God is. Like a mother who comforts her children, so will I comfort you. That is the God of my understanding. And maybe the vengeful God people are getting something out of that. I don't understand what it is, but I'm not buying it, and I'm damn sure not selling it. So that's what I know. What you got for us, Cindy, here in the last few seconds?
Well, I think what a gift. I know. I think what a wonderful gift to the world you are, Darrell, that you were able to minister end of life at that time and give comfort to those who were estranged from their families because they came out at the same time they got their death sentence. And thank God it's not necessarily a death sentence these days, but it's still killing. Last year, over 700,000 people died worldwide of age-related illnesses last year. So it's still not over. And
places where homophobia is religiously motivated, and where people are in danger, like they can be brutalized, they can be not only ostracized, but actually physically attacked for being suspected of being gay. In those places, people will not go to the pharmacy to get their meds, even if the government give them for free, for fear of people thinking that means they're gay. and then they're going to get, beat up or run out of town, or their house burned down, or whatever. So yeah, a lot of people die of AIDS for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons, especially in really homophobic cultures, is fear of accessing treatment for fear that it will out them as being gay. Belief in a cruel God will make us cruel. We've got to get a better God, better no God than a cruel God.
I agree.
I believe that God is omnipresent love, that God will not abandon you because God cannot abandon you. You're part of God. God's not going to abandon you, just like your thumb is not going to abandon you, because it's all part of the same thing. But if you can get your head around that, and all you got is a good God, a mean God, better no God. And then eventually maybe you'll find your way back into some sort of spiritual communion that is nourishing and life-giving. But if all you've got is something toxic and scary, who needs that? Go ahead.
We need to be more humankind.
Yes. Well, let's. Wow, Helen, she got us going after all, right? You thought you didn't know anything about her, people? Well, she sparked some stuff today, and I think she'd be proud. I think she'd be pleased, because she wanted to heal. She was a healer, and one of the things she wanted to heal people from was toxic, negative religious dogma. And so she said, the quintessence of insanity is in a religion that embraces the idea of a vengeful God and a condition of endless punishment. Helen rejected such an idea, and so do I, and so does Cindy Lippert, and that's all that really matters. So Big Mama Cindy says, ain't no vengeful God, so we're gonna believe her.
Yep, I think it's a good idea.
It's just a thought, but it may be just the one someone needs today.
Could save somebody's life today.
So thanks for joining us. Let's do it again next Saturday. Thanks, Cindy.